All right, hello, welcome everyone to another episode of Redefining Customer Journey Management, where it is our job to bring together world-class CX professionals and deconstruct their strategies, tactics, and struggles to give you techniques, methods, and perhaps even resources, maybe we'll hear a few today, to start redefining customer journey management in your organization too. My name is Jochem van der Veer. I'm the co-founder of TheyDo. And we're a software platform for journey management, and we are designed to give teams overview and manage all journeys in one place. And my co-host today, as always, is Harald from Essence, the CX consultancy specialized in journey design. No doubt there's a match, given that our tooling and consulting go hand in hand, but that's not really the reason why we are here or why we started this series in the first place. There's something happening in our domain. So the domain of customer experience is changing. We've gone past the journey mapping stage, and we went from all over the place to one place. And obviously the current situation, working from home, is accelerating this even further. Companies are transforming towards journey management, and we have actually made it our mission to help accelerate this change. But besides helping companies and their leaders to accelerate, we believe also that journey management is about to become the next thing in business. And we use the series of live streams, 5 in total, to discover exactly how. So today we have invited 2 guests to the show. They've earned their stripes in journey management over the years, and they have both created journey management systems, but did so in very different ways for their companies. First, Niels Corsten, welcome. Hello, Niels.
Thanks, Jochem. Very pleased to be here.
Niels is actually leading CX and service design at VodafoneZiggo. And with a wide-ranging experience in both fields, he even co-developed the service design maturity model, to name just one thing. He actually brings a fresh perspective on creating this lasting journey framework. And today, we want to learn more about the role journeys play at VodafoneZiggo. And our second guest, hey Jons Janssens.
Hello, nice to be here.
Thank you for joining. He's actually the former CIO of Ace and Tate. And for folks who don't know it, maybe there are some people, but I guess not many. It's an eyewear brand, and they sell glasses direct to consumer. And Jons helped transform this company into an omni-channel experience. Today, we actually want to know how he sees technology as the rails to enable customer journeys, and not the other way around. What I personally like is that his trademark is actually providing customers with the freedom of how, where, and when to shop. And his newest company is focusing around scaling companies in the e-commerce space to become more customer-centric. So 2 very different perspectives, and we're going to bring it all together today. As it is a live session, we want you to join us. So if you have a question, you can use the Q&A below. You can use the chat as we go. At the end, we'll take 15 minutes to go through the live Q&A with everything we find along the way. And you can join the discussion using the tools below we have. Also, we'll do a few polls, as you are familiar with us already. But before we dig in, actually, Harald, maybe you can set the stage for us. And in this series, we created a model, a frame around journey management, and we shaped the outline in the first episode. Today, we're focusing on the first topic. Can you briefly explain what we mean with organizing journeys, actually?
Yeah, sure. To bring up the visual, yeah. So welcome everyone. You see the visual representation of what Herman drew last time of what we discussed in the previous webinar. And what we discussed last time is that customer journey management, of course, it is. There's more to it, but the main 4 key components of it are. And to first organize your journeys as an organization is step 1, but also then define how you organize your teams around it. And so okay, once you've agreed a set of journeys as a company, how do you actually structure your organization to work against these journeys? And then thirdly, also, how do you collaborate on these journeys? Like who does what, who is in charge, who has the overview, who prioritizes, who defines the roadmap, etc. So it's important to also define your way of working. And last but not least, how do you measure your impact? Like, do you actually have success in improving customer experience and business value, working from from this centralized customer journey management system that we have tried to visualize here. Ultimately, all of this visual is trying to show is that we go from the bottom. Everything an organization does is to obviously deliver great value to customers. That's what the customer journey management, of course, is trying to achieve. But today we're zooming in on step one. So in the next 4 webinars, we have a series of 4 webinars lined up. First one is today, or actually the second one, but the first one of these 4, zooming in on organizing journeys. And so why is that important? Is before teams and organizations start to researching and improving their customer journeys, it is crucial to define which journeys are actually strategic for a company, so that you all agree, okay, these are the key customer journeys that we want to excel in as a company. So that's one, and to also avoid that companies in the different departments within a company duplicate or have conflicting of overlapping of duplicating journeys. You really want to make sure that as an organization you agree how to structure the way you work around these customer journeys, so that in the end all the puzzle pieces come together for a great end result. Yeah, and also what we actually refer to as an agreed set of journeys is we call that a customer journey framework. So how do you structure your end-to-end journey, and maybe structure it with smaller micro journeys that smaller teams can work against. Yeah, but often it for small companies this can be one journey. Yeah? So last time also we had smaller companies and corporations in the webinar. So for small companies, mid-sized businesses, their business can actually be one core journey. But for corporations, of course, this can also be many journeys. And in some corporations, you might even have different journey frameworks if you have completely separate business units. Yeah. But yeah, today we'll be hearing from Niels and from Jons about how basically they tackled this within VodafoneZiggo and Ace&Tates. So that's what we'll zoom in on today.
Thanks, Harald. Nice framing. Also a nice drawing, Herman. We're very glad that you can join us to bring the model a little bit further today. We're gonna erase a few parts and redo a few things, but maybe before we dig in, it's nice that we will ask everyone at home to look at how they actually organize their journey. So I have a polling question, which I'll launch now, is how are your customer journeys currently organized? Nothing is organized, maybe a few are organized, most of them are organized, or everything is organized in a system. We're very curious where you are. I mean, we have a lot of customer experience professionals from large corporations, from smaller e-commerce brands today joining us. So this is a little fun exercise for us to start. I see that almost everyone has voted. I'll take it 2 seconds. And then I'm going to ditch the screen from Herman a little bit, because we want to dig in. And actually, Niels, you joined VodafoneZiggo a year ago. I'm going to end the poll. Can you briefly describe your role in the organization right now? Also maybe contrasting to where it was when you started, but actually how you went about of organizing all the journeys, because we believe that you're doing a phenomenal job there. And we were very curious to learn if you could take us and everyone at home a little bit step by step through the process that you and your teams are actually on right now.
Yeah, sure. I think first thing it's good to understand, I joined VodafoneZiggo 10 months ago. And actually my first day at office, let's say, was actually also the first day in lockdown for all of our Dutch citizens, including me. So most of the work that I've been doing in the past 10 months has been done virtually. And I actually joined VodafoneZiggo as the head of CX and service design. And me actually joining the organization was also part of a little bit of a reorganization of the previous customer experience management team. So we actually moved from being inside a few specific journey teams, being more centralized within the company, also kind of, being able to impact the rest of the company a little bit more than when we were part of a few journey teams. So I'm currently hosting or leading a team of 11 CX and service design specialists. And basically our work is twofold. On the one hand, we help the business improve customer experience, so that's very much hands-on. And the second part is more on driving a customer-centric transformation throughout the company. So making sure that the entire company becomes more customer-minded and gets all the tools and all the systems and processes in place to actually act in a customer-centric way. And obviously in that second part, that's also where me and my team are working on building a customer journey framework. And we are currently kind of doing a reiteration on existing work that has already been there for quite a while. And if I look, and I think if you look at the current developments that we are going through, is that we are coming from a customer lifecycle that has been defined, which constitutes of 7 key customer journeys that we identified that are really key to the customer experience that we want to provide to both Vodafone as well as Ziggo customers. And currently we are actually kind of enlarging that framework into a more elaborate framework, let's say, that helps us to not just define the key 7 journeys, but to basically enable the entire company to think in a more customer-centric way. So it's basically an enabler for the entire company to understand where are CX improvement opportunities and where we could also align different business units on that specific journey. So I think if you...
Niels, was that also why it was centralized? Is it to make sure that you move from journeys that were done in different teams into a company-wide agreed set of key journeys that were linked to the life cycle? Was that the trigger to organize that in a center of excellence that you described?
Simply stated, yes. I think looking at where we come from, then you saw that we had on the operational side of business, let's say, we had 12 teams that also owned, each kind of owned a specific journey. So we had customer experience managers, and each of them knew all the ins and outs of one specific journey and knew where were the opportunities for improvement, which initiatives were running to actually improve customer experience. And then actually by business, we saw the urge to kind of centralize that thinking much more. So not having certain journey owners just in the teams, but making sure that customer journeys were an enabling factor for the entire company. So that's why we reorganized our team to what we in agile terminology call a center of excellence, which basically means that we are an internal team that enables the entire company, regardless of operations or the commercial side of the business, with anything relating customer experience and service design. So it gives us and my team the opportunity to impact customer experience across the company, and obviously then also gives us more responsibility to do so.
Yeah, so that helped actually to move away from doing excellent journey work in a certain department to a structured way of working so that all activities in different departments add up to like a company-wide benefit for the life cycle of your customers.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay, can you explain a little bit of because you said like we're branching out this model earlier, if I understood correctly. So you had 7 journeys and now you have more. What are the different levels that we're thinking of, or what are the levels that you see, or how are you doing this? Can you explain a little bit how you structure that? Yeah,
of course. I think first thing I need to mention here is that this is really a transition or a transformation that we are in, right? We are not at the end of the development yet. We are in the midst of the development of the framework. So I think that's good to consider. I think for us, at least as far as we know now, so that is still up for discussion throughout company, I would say, currently we have 4-level defined when it comes to customer journeys. So the first one, if you put it simply, is the customer lifecycle. And that constitutes the end-to-end lifecycle of what customers could go through when they join either Vodafone or Ziggo. So this is also brand agnostic lifecycle that goes across brands and also across segments. So this applies to both B2C as well as B2B. And this lifecycle is basically used to kind of align the teams across the organization, but to also use it as a framework to define key KPIs. So those seven journeys also are used to measure NPS, for example.
Can you just give us? Can you give one example, Niels, of just to give a bit of a feeling for what those phases are? Is that the classical purchase decision journey from awareness to installation and usage, or can you say a little bit about that on a generic level?
Yeah, sure. That also basically leads me to level number 2. That is kind of the strategic customer journey level across company. So those are actually the more detailed levels of the customer journeys that are in the life cycle. One of them is obviously, Harald, as you are saying, is what we call the orient, buy, and setup journey. So that's the purchasing, buying journey, setting up your devices, and making sure that you're all set for users, basically. And that journey, we have 7 of them, obviously, and those journeys constitute of different journey moments that people run through. And we have, let's say, a very strategic way of visualizing an experience curve across each of those journeys. And then basically we try to tie the key initiatives across company that we are running to kind of improve that journey specifically. And so this is also basically the level that we do, let's say, journey performance monitoring. So we monitor the performance of each of those 7 journeys there. And then if we go to level number 3, level number 3 is a more detailed view on those journeys. It's more tactical, if you would say. And this is basically what most of the POs are using within the Agile squads. And here we are including all of the nitty-gritty of the customer experience. So we define all the customer pains, all of the activities that people or that customers run through, all with the idea to get a really thorough understanding of what customers are experiencing, what we could improve, what is already going well, and that also kind of drives our backlogs of the different teams.
Is it fair to say, Niels, that?
And then to complete.
Is it fair to say then that level 2 is more the ideal journeys and more descriptive of what you're trying to achieve, and that level 3 is more the actual state and the current performance and customer experience? Is that how you would describe it, or what's the difference between the two?
I would say that, within level 2, I would say we are trying to combine, or we're trying to visualize both the as-is situation as well as desired, also for the organization to be kind of a strategic roadmap for the future. And this is very much used on a strategic level, just to understand how are we performing on each of these journeys, and basically what big initiatives are running to drive the CX performance. So there's not a lot of detail in those journeys, let's say.
Yeah.
And maybe to also then complete the framework, looking at level number 4. I think we go much more into depth in terms of all the different touch points that customers can experience. I think some people might call it user journeys. So this is really, the nitty-gritty of the different screens that people will go through if they go through a certain installation flow, for example. And there we also try to understand the consistency of tone of voice, the consistency of terminology that we use, and so forth.
Yeah. And another question, these are the 7 key journeys, and I like how you really selected 7 key journeys to say, okay, this is the key, because this is all strategically important for VodafoneZiggo to do well? Are there also journeys that fall outside, like for example B2B or other journeys that fall outside of this framework, or is that not your responsibility, or how do you deal with those, or is that currently not addressed by your team?
Yeah, we actually try to tie every journey. So every journey that kind of feels like it's falling outside of scope generally goes into level number 3. So where on level 2, to get back to the example that I gave earlier, we have the order and buy and setup journey, for example. This goes across products, across segments, across brands. And then going into level 3, for example, we would make a separate order and buy and setup journey for internet compared to telephone, compared to television, for example. Because obviously the customer pains that customers can experience are very different when you try to install your Wi-Fi compared to trying to install TV, for example. So there in level 3, I guess you have a lot of alterations or versions from the order and buy and setup journey, which are more product specific or segment specific.
That's a good point, because actually in some journeys, you of course are in a better customer experience state than others. And you mentioned your center of excellence, and also driven at the moment still on demand based. So basically teams wanting to hire you basically as an internal support and center of excellence for these things, which is great, of course. Teams wanting to work with you and you support them. At the same time, you also want to strategically decide where to prioritize from a life cycle from level 1. How do you deal with that, with those two dynamics of one's a pull or also being in control top down? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think we are because we are a center of excellence that has only been around for 10 months. So we are also still finding our own way of work, let's say. I think where in the past few, in the past year, let's say, we work more from a pool perspective. So we just helped out the teams that knew how to find us, basically. And currently we are really making the transition to also do a little bit of push there. So we have a pretty good understanding also from NPS metrics that are currently present. In which of the journeys, we need to do a step up, basically.
I like how you phase it, because this way you're setting yourself up at the moment for demand-based working, but you're also preparing yourself for being more strategically driven in the near future. So I think it's a good way to phase it. I can imagine it can work.
Can I ask you something about the? Sorry, Niels. What?
No worries.
I want to interrupt.
Go ahead, Jochem.
What I'm really curious about when you see this is like, this looks amazing, and you work in a very large organization that has been around for a long time. When you see an opportunity in your journey emerge, is there always room to immediately act on it, or is there, the elephant in the room, a legacy system involved, or some databases that are not connected that prevent you from actually acting on it? How is that happening?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Jochem, and I think it's really something, in a big corporate organization like VodafoneZiggo, this is something that obviously you need to deal with. And I think we are making really big steps within VodafoneZiggo with regards to the agile way of working. So the speed and the velocity that our teams have is greatly improved in the past few years. So we are working with the agile squads. We are working in a quarterly cadence. So if you see an opportunity, we could either reprioritize backlogs and have stuff done pretty quickly. That being said, obviously we are a company that is that is still kind of a technology company. So we have a lot of both technology as well as systems, both internally as well as customer-facing systems that has been around for quite a while. And obviously this is something that we need to work with. This is something that we need to consider if we try to pinpoint an opportunity. or even more focused, when we try to come up with innovations or improvements on that specific opportunity, we need to take into account the systems and processes that we have around that, of which, you know, some are not up for very radical changes very quickly.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch a little bit to Jons, because when we contrast this to the fast-moving world of e-commerce and the direct-to-consumer approach that you have experienced at building Ace&Tate, can you, using what Niels just addressed in a large organization, give us a little bit of a contrast how you saw this change to this omni-channel experience that you have developed, where you really use technology as the enabler for the experience of your customers? And can you shine a light on, maybe there are a few similarities or differences, how you actually have experienced that journey from, you know, zero to a scale company at Ace&Tate?
Yeah, I think the size is very different. However, some of the challenges are fairly the same as well. So even for a company that the size of Ace&Tate, when I joined, they've been sort of operational for about 2 years. And even in 2 years, you can create some legacy systems, not at the scale of Vodafone, I would say. But I think that's actually one of the things that caught my eye when I saw your first session. I fully agree with everything that's on the visual that you made. However, I felt that one critical component is missing, and that's basically systems or technology or whatever you want to call it. And you never really start with a clean slate in that sense. Would be great if you're doing a startup, you can really do it from a new perspective. But what I've seen is that the complexity in the organization really grows when you add more people, basically. And people are the ones that are using the systems. And those are basically, for me at least, the rails underneath your customer journey. So yeah, I think it really helps to define the customer journey. You need to align your teams around it as well. But for me, it's essential to also align your systems around it. And there's even a word for that called Conway's law, which is basically some very smart computer scientist that said it in the 60s, that sort of there's a correlation between your organizational structure and your code base. And that's something I've experienced firsthand myself.
Yeah, Jons, I recognize this also from my corporate days, that you know, systems and processes were organized, were matching the organizational structure. Can you relate to that also on a journey level, like when customer journeys, when you were started at Ace&Tate and in the years that you've been there, how journeys were organized? I think when we chatted last time briefly about online versus offline, or how that was organized. Is that a similar phenomenon, or how did you deal with that?
It's actually one of the reasons I joined Ace&Tate. I think Ace&Tate was really uniquely positioned to really become an omnichannel company. So Ace&Tate is a company that only designs and sells its own brand via its own channels, which it makes it really well set up to really control the full end-to-end customer journey and all customer experiences related, basically. And I think that was really exciting for me to sort of tap in there. And I think that's something that's interesting within sort of this new buzzword, or maybe already an old buzzword, omnichannel. A lot of old companies moving online, and now there are some online companies also moving offline, like Coolblue, for example. And I think Ace&Tate, at least my initial ambition there, was to sort of really think that through. And what type of technical architecture do you need if you really approach this from a end-to-end customer journey that is by definition omnichannel? Because a customer doesn't look at a company as in, I'm going to buy something online via the web or offline or whatever channel that may arise in the future. They just want to buy from a company. And a customer constantly switches between all these channels. I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of companies have, is that really complicates your technology stack as well. So how do you set up your technology stack to deal with these continuous change of channels, new channels popping up? And it's really hard to sort of get a grip on the customer in that sense, because they switch from chat to web to Instagram to, like, they're all over the place. So that was at least for me the challenge, and that's sort of the easiest way to explain my role. Is what I try to do is remove friction from the end-to-end customer journey, and therefore we had a really strong view on how to set up your technology stack for that. And that's also the teams that reported into me were basically the teams that built the technology to support that customer journey. Yeah,
and I like how you bridged the two, because of course, on the one hand, your digital or omni-channel infrastructure on a technical level, and also how you define your customer journeys and actually customer preferences around different channels for certain journeys. Maybe you can say a little bit about, how you decide which journeys to support via which channels and how you make those trade-offs.
Yeah, for me, journeys were basically always a tool to align or even structure my roadmap. So I think that's there's a hierarchy in that. You start off with the products and the service that a company provides. You break that up into a certain set of journeys. And those journeys you break up into certain touch points. And these touch points, they are made with within certain channels. And that's sort of a breakdown in which you can basically define the anatomy of a company or the experience or the customer experience that a company wants to deliver, basically. And one of the insights that I had is that that's a sort of a continuous change. There will always will continue to pop up new channels, basically. And that's what a lot of companies are challenging, they're struggling with, is that they're happy that they finally finished their mobile website, and now there's this nasty thing called voice, and now maybe in the future something like VR is popping up. And how do you handle that, basically? For me, journeys are always a tool to assess where to invest and where not to invest. So the roadmap is structured across journeys, and then based on, let's say, we had a 2-week sprint, or I looked at the roadmap from a quarterly basis and then said, okay, how many features and how many development capacity we're going to add to which journey? And the journey resembled NPS and revenue. And those were basically key metrics per journey. And that really is a really helpful tool to structure your roadmap. And if you break those journeys across the channels, you basically get a fairly simple table in which you can see, for example, a Ace&Tate journey was buying glasses, for example. Well, that goes pretty well via the web. For certain occasions, it's even better offline. So retail is just a channel for us. But if you take into account voice, for example, yeah, that really sucks. So buying glasses via voice is very difficult to do. Where does voice excel, for example, in a different journey, like booking a night test, which is also one of our journeys. So booking a night test via the web is also pretty good. Booking a night test in store, well, it's pretty shitty because you have to take out your calendar, and that's just annoying. But via voice, that can present a real nice opportunity. So that's basically a framework I put together to decide which channel services which journey. And that was really helpful to decide where to invest time and money.
Yeah, and that can really help also when new technology emerges, like voice or VR or chatbot, for example, that instead of just jumping on it and going for it all the way, is to be very smart about understanding where these channels actually have the strengths and weaknesses, and then say, okay, where does it make sense to apply those channels in our journey, and where does it not, and then take advantage of these channel qualities. So I guess a journey framework or a journey structure with an omni-channel coverage can really help you make that calls. Is that what you experienced also at Ace&Tates? I mean, I guess that's what you're describing, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's at least one of my mantras has been elevate the benefits per channel. So it's not that one channel is better than the other. Like often a lot of people say, yeah, the web is really scalable and it's a lot better. Well, not to a customer, if you ask me. Certain things on the web are really great, like search, right? So you can search complete catalog and stuff like that. However, offline, and I think another example, Ace&Tate is hopefully in a good example in that sense. Like when you go into a store, you want someone who is professional, who is well-trained, who has deep product and customer knowledge. That's really good about offline because you can interact with a human, which is really, is a real big benefit. Apple is another example there, right? So you go offline to go to the Genius Bar. That's really good offline. Other things are better online, but that's exactly how to break up that experience into certain journeys. And then from there decide which benefits to elevate per channel, basically.
And did you balance that against internal efficiencies? Like, for example, there's also, of course, cost efficiencies maybe that you can use on certain channels. How did you guys balance, customer benefit of the preferences of a certain channel against internal benefits of, cost reduction or streamlining your operations, for example?
Yeah, I think in the end, you can't really influence it. The customer is in control, right? But you can nudge them into certain journeys. So, for example, doing a web return is fairly costly. So you can nudge them to return their frame within store, basically, which is cheaper and easier for us and could even present a better experience as well. So I think that's if you have the complete overview of these separate journeys, then you can assess based on what the best is for the customer, and maybe also align, it's really, there's multiple possibilities. So in general, I think you need to keep open all these possibilities. And the customer will in the end decide what suits them best. And I think that's also something to sort of be aware of, is that you need to be agile to a certain extent, that for certain occasions, what the best journey is differs, right? So if, for example, the delivery times, that's also something that's always endlessly debated in e-commerce. There's a lot of buzz around same-day delivery, right? So yes, in certain occasions, that's a great journey. If you, I don't know, want to catch a plane tomorrow or whatever. But sometimes the right day is even a better journey. So I think that's also something to align for, that at least the technology stack enables you to service all these journeys. But in the end, the customer is in control, and they will decide how to interact with your company.
I like how you're describing the technology is, of course, in the end, is just enabling customer experience. But the other way around as well, that customer journeys can really help you make tactical choices about your tech stack, which is also it works both ways. So it's good to see that customer journeys can help you improve customer experience, but also inform your technology's infrastructure. So
and the other way around as well, right? So if you set up your technology stack in the right way, you have an operating data model or metrics model, whatever you want to call it, that is going to inform you a lot on these buzzwords like one view of the customer and all these different things. If you set it up right, you get the right KPIs, and which then sort of feed into your journeys, and then in the end help you with sort of prioritizing things on your backlog. So in the end, it's about a cohesive system that brings in processes, people, systems, and your data model. Those are the key components of an omnichannel strategy, if you ask me.
Niels, I see you nodding. I can imagine in Vodafone retail and online, it's not very different. Can you recognize some of the things being discussed here by Jons?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I think I very much recognize what Jons is saying with regards to the process and the people and the technology getting together. That's also what we try to achieve, to try to understand what experience do we have, and or what experience do we want, do we desire for our customers? What is the to be experience, and what does that mean in terms of the internal processes, the internal systems, and the technology that we are using. And obviously, it also goes the other way around, as Jons is stating. Both internal systems and technology is also influencing and in the most positive case enabling the experience that you can deliver to customers.
Yeah, what I like is that customer journey perspective, or actually plotting things along a customer journey, can also bring together people that focus on technology and focus on customer to speak kind of from the same departure point, or from the same ambition or the same language. And so journeys can actually also facilitate that multidisciplinary collaboration, I find, which is very helpful, I think.
Is it now easier for you, Niels, at Vodafone? Now you have the framework to also understand better what the future journeys for your customers should look like? I mean, obviously you do qualitative research and talk to your customers and put that back into your journeys. But now that you have a framework, does it also help you to navigate those future scenarios in this changing environment? How do you go about that? Using the journey framework,
yeah,
I think what goes where.
Yeah, I think the framework helps us a lot to try and see the dependency or the connections between the different journeys, right? That looking at, I don't know, if a technician needs to come to your house, for example, that could happen either in the orient, buy, and setup journey, or in the I want to fix. If your TV is broken and you've had it for 5 years. That could help you, if you need to get a technician to your home. So there is basically micro journeys that would happen in both orient, buy, and setup, as well as customers that have been around for 5 years, and trying to understand, what those micro journeys, where those micro journeys happen across the entire customer lifecycle, very much helps us to understand not just the size of the opportunity that we're looking at, but also the amount of effort we want to put in terms of the experience that we're trying to improve there. And I personally very much believe, and especially in a big company like VodafoneZiggo, I very much believe in the concept of service patterns.
Can you elaborate what that means?
Where you have a service pattern is, let's say, if you put it simple, it's not much more than a design system as you know it from a user interface perspective, but then applied on entire services, right? So as I just mentioned, trying to get a technician to your home, that could happen both in Oriented setup as well as in I want to fix. And what you actually want to prevent is that both of those teams separately are going to identify that opportunity and are going to build their own systems and their own technology enablers to make a good experience there. Yeah. So if you can allocate by using that the journey framework, if you can allocate that we have very similar challenges with regards to customer experience in one journey compared to the other, you can start identifying those patterns and say like, okay, we want to create a very consistent pattern that we can provide both in the Oriented setup journey as well as in others.
Yeah, and that's actually, is that also covered in your level 2 that you described in your like more tactical journeys, like on how you describe those patterns there, or is that?
I wish that was the case, Harald.
That's the ambition. I hear that's the ambition, or?
Yeah. I think this is really something that also within VodafoneZiggo we can still take a lot of steps upon. Yeah. But I think first thing is you need to make stuff transparent, right? So mapping out those journeys, understanding what is actually happening from a customer perspective, gives you the opportunity to then also look across those journeys and see where are differences and similarities, and where you can do stuff with regards to improving and using technology and existing systems.
Yeah.
What is one of the things that you've learned along the way, Niels, at your stint at VodafoneZiggo, you wish you knew the day you started, that actually has now been something that you learned along the way?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it sounds very, very logical, but I would say stop talking about customer journeys and why they are valuable, and just start mapping them out. Because you can have a lot of discussion on what is a journey, and obviously in a big corporate like VodafoneZiggo, people have different ideas or different constructs around what a journey is and what it should do. And you can have endless conversations around that, I would say. Also, because I think that's where we started. Jochem, you saying that customer journeys are becoming more popular, right? We really see transitions happening here. It's kind of becoming a buzzword, or it is a buzzword, I would say. So it's really going to help you to not just talk about journeys and why they would be of value, but just start with one journey, start mapping it out, and show the value while doing it. Because I thoroughly believe that kind of mapping out those journeys together with other disciplines and other expertises, the value will show itself.
And it evolves. I mean, nobody gets it right completely the first time. So it's also just by getting started and you realize maybe, we should maybe have a slightly different level of detail, but that's a learning process. And I think that needs a few iterations before you start scaling it to the entire organization. But I completely agree about to start doing it, because then you at least connect different disciplines to work towards a common ambition, I guess.
Yeah, and Harald, I think you're touching upon a really essential point here, that customer journey mapping is not something that you work towards and then we have a journey and then we're finished because we mapped out the whole thing and apparently we now have something great. It's really not much more than a means to an end, right? It's just a tool that helps you map out the current experience and should function as a backbone for your squad to start improving upon. So a journey map is never finished. It's a working document.
It has been. I mean, maybe in the last 5 years, maybe it was more of a research deliverable, but now it's becoming more the perspective from which we collaborate. Yeah, and I think it should really be like almost like what you act on and start documenting as a living document.
That adoption is almost what we're looking at now is that it becomes more important. So then also it becomes a little bit more scary to the rest of the organization, threatening almost, like, hey, this has bigger implications than just the research delivery. So you need to take that into account when taking the rest of the organization to adopt a journey way of working.
Maybe quickly to tap in there, Jochem, if that's okay.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
one of the sort of maybe not sure if the thread is the right word, but I think a lot of most companies are still organized in functional silos, basically, and therefore journeys are sort of conflicting that as well. And I think that's also something that is really challenging within companies, is that you need to deal with that, basically. So if executive leadership is not on board with this way of thinking, forget about it. It's not going to happen.
How did you do that? How did you get everyone on board with the journey thinking? What was your secret sauce there?
Well, in all honesty, I haven't been too successful there. I think the teams that work with me adopted the thinking, and I tried to inspire and influence others as well. But also Ace&Tate was also functionally organized. And I think that's something that sort of is how a company is set up from the start, right? So I think a lot of, especially old school leaders, they think that it's a very hierarchical way of having control on your company, basically. And to a certain extent, you lose some of that control if you adopt more agile thinking or cross-functional teams, and you basically say the customer is in control. That's different. So people, especially in old school structured companies, they have trouble dealing with that. So I think, that's something I've sort of tried to repeat, especially for my teams. It went fairly well, because it's not something I have an ambition for. I think it's really good to have self-sufficient teams that sort of do what the customer wants. How can you disagree with that? But there's a lot of, old school leaders that disagree with that, or they want to have the control. They think that they know what's right. I don't presume that I do.
Even if they do agree, I mean, it can take 2 years for the organization really to learn that transition. I mean, it's not, you can't just draw a new org chart and say, hey, we're great. I mean, it's really taking time, skill sets, getting used to it, figuring out the right level of collaboration, who decides what. I mean, in most companies that we've worked with, it takes at least 2 years to really master it, I think.
Yeah, maybe just to make that a tangible answer for Jochem, I think that's one of the tactics I did at least, is to really show tangible evidence that it works, right? So really show usability research videos, for example, that people are really struggling with a certain part, really a lot of friction within your journey somewhere. That's really easy to, really helps to convince people. Like if they don't agree, just don't say, take my word for it. Just look at this video with a customer that doesn't get it, basically, right? So I think that sort of really helps to make it tangible and concrete.
That makes a lot of sense. Want to zoom out a little bit, because what I see, Niels, before I go to you, is that both of you actually have, from first principles, so it seemed, created a whole journey framework for your organization, coming from different directions. So what we're seeing here is that the journey framework is really important in getting to that next step. Before I go to the Q&A, Niels, you were adding something to what Jons was saying.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, kind of here to Jons' statement. I think showing that evidence from customers, it's not necessarily that people in the organization are willingly disagreeing with customers. It's all about debunking assumptions that people have. And when it comes to how customers experience our services, there's a lot of assumptions being made. And showing that evidence from customer research helps you to kind of show factual evidence of the way it is. And I think that very much helps, and also opens eyes across company.
Yeah, and it can help at the link between technology and customer experience, because I think we've also seen companies where technology is really in a different level of the building or a completely different department, and they hardly talk to each other. So sometimes it's even in such a way that development doesn't even fully realize what they're actually enabling for customers, and through customer journeys and linking technology choices with the customer journeys. People also in non-CX and non-design disciplines have a much more vivid idea of how they're contributing to customer value, which I think is a real benefit to working like this as well.
And that was exactly my point in sort of in your last session. Like in a lot of companies, the technology dictates the process, right? So in a certain ERP system or these other crappy old school systems that a lot of people have to deal with, they are set up in the 90s somewhere, and they usually dictate how it should be used. And you can't work with that in a different way. So I think that's a big difference between a company that's digital native and is not. Like most non-digital native companies, they just adopt the process that the system dictates for them. And if you have your own development teams, if you have your own cross-functional teams, you could try to flip that. So you can actually try to have the technology do what you want to do it instead of the other way around.
Yeah.
Let's address some of the questions that we got from the Q&A while we are in the session. I will work top to bottom, see if we can tackle them all. I want to start with Joris Hans, who asked, do you only create and measure KPIs for level 1? I guess this one is for Niels, or also for the other levels, and if so, why?
Yeah, I would say good question. And I think it has a simple answer. We have specific KPIs for each of the levels. So where I would say, customer lifetime value and NPS are key metrics for level 1 and 2 specifically. In level 3, that could also include cost to serve, or customer effort score, or and in level 4 you go into stuff like conversion rates, those kind of things. So it very much depends not only on the levels, but even on individual journeys. What is the thing you're after there, and then go from there.
Yeah, just to clarify, Sarah asked, is level 4 a product/service level journey? Did I get that right? She asked.
To some extent, yes. I think here we try to map out, the experience that people have across channels. So I think you could compare it kind of to user flows as they are being used in the UX discipline.
Yeah. I guess the next question from Mark van Tok is a little bit for both of you. Jons, maybe you can answer it first. He asked, how research-based are your journeys, and how strict are you about researching before mapping a journey? Does this differ per level or per channel, maybe?
Yes, I think they're definitely defined and validated by research. And I think the definition of research is interesting as well, because one of the teams that also reported into me was what we call the CX team, which is in certain companies like the customer service team. And that's what something I said is they do customer research all day. They speak to customers continuously. So for me, that was actually one of the insights that it really helped my role as well, to actually see what is wrong or where the friction is in a certain journey. So yeah, I think continuously they need to be researched, and they basically need to be validated. And if you feed that info back into the development and the product owners, I think that's really valuable. So our product owners actually had I think bi-weekly one-on-one with the customer experience people, because yeah, they firsthand see what sort of is not working in the journey. Yeah. Apart from just regular usability research, which we also did, but I think this is more important.
And how do you tackle that at VodafoneZiggo, Niels?
Yeah, good question. I think looking at doing research, I very much agree with Jons that this is very, very much a continuous endeavor. I think, yeah, it also very much depends on what's your definition of research. For us, the first step that we would do is map out an inside-out journey with all of the knowledge and expertise we have within the company, right? So including technicians, including people from customer service, including people that know a lot about the underlying processes, and try to already map out the journey, to the best extent we could, understanding the key problems that we already know are there, before we kind of do any research deep dives. So I would consider that mapping inside-out journey with all kinds of different disciplines, I would consider that research as well.
Yeah, with inside out, you mean starting from the company before talking to customers or clients or partners? Yeah,
because that also enables us to, when we actually start talking to customers, to have a much more targeted and much more defined research question.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if I'm taking a question from Sarah van der Wiel, asked like, how do you both use service blueprints? And for people at home who don't know the term, service blueprint is also a tool like a customer journey that you can use to map the services. We talk specifically about customer journeys today, and that technology or your solutions are a layer in those journeys. Maybe good to address service blueprints as a whole. Do you use them at all at VodafoneZiggo, Niels?
I would say yes and no. Service blueprints, in the sense that we know them from the service design practice, let's say, is something we use occasionally, I would say. For me, it makes much more sense because we have we have an entire department on process design. So all the underlying processes that enable a certain customer experience we provide to customers is something that is being documented, is being designed by an entire department. So we try to very much search for the collaboration with the process designers to kind of align the stuff that they are doing, the decisions that they are making with regards to internal processes and how that might affect or impact the actual customer experience. So I would say if you look at a service blueprint as a tool that might help you kind of map out the internal processes and how they connect to the actual experience that customers have, then this is something we do on a continuous basis.
Yeah. And just from my understanding, do the process designers and the service designers or the CX team look at the same truth, or do they have both different versions of the flows and the journeys that you're working with?
No, they are, very simply said, they are looking at the same truth. Yeah. So we have a single source of truth when it comes to customer journeys and a single source of truth when it comes to the processes. And simply said, both of them are mapped in different systems, but they are always linked.
Exactly. I mean, ultimately, you want to work from the same framework. Otherwise, you're actually not comparing apples to apples. And in the end, that's not going to help the collaboration then. Yeah. But I can imagine it takes some time because they were process designers before you had your journey framework. So it also takes some time adjusting, I guess. But that's a good way to
yeah, but I would very much go away of the general assumption that process designers, for example, lack a good customer perspective or are not customer centric in any way. Actually, a lot of process designers that I've met at VodafoneZiggo are super customer centric. They are amongst the most customer centric people I know. So I think that is really something that is we need to kind of get rid of. That we are the sole experts of understanding what customers want and kind of being advocates of the customer, of the voice of the customer. You can find customer advocates across company. I would say it's not something that we own as a discipline.
Absolutely.
I want to do one more question before we close off today for maybe for Jons. It's a nice one to answer because future journeys, current journeys, real innovation, maybe even disruptive innovation, dare I say the word disruptive, can be based on journeys. How do you see the role of a customer journey being effective or annoying even in thinking long-term, thinking about changes or thinking about true innovation?
Yeah, question for me, Jochem?
Yeah, if you can elaborate a little bit on how you see the actual journey map or the customer journey as a tool to navigate future concepts or thinking about the long term.
Yeah, well, I think not to introduce another framework, but I think that's something I've used a lot. Basically, before I would use service design thinking or design thinking, is a jobs to be done framework, which is famous from Clayton Christensen. And I think that sort of really drills down to first principles of what a service needs to do, basically, right? So, for example, within Ace&Tate is that, yes, we sell glasses, but that's not why people buy glasses from us. They want to see better and they want to look good, right? That's the job to be done. And from there, you can basically say, okay, what are other, it's a shitty word, but what other innovations, what are other disruptive innovations, as in will be market changing for a sense. I think that's something at least I use there is sort of what other products or what other solutions you can fit within that same job to be done. And then if you identify one, then you can map it out within a journey basically. But I think there's a danger for journeys that sort of they limit your thinking to a certain extent as well, because they sort of are a very useful tool to improve what you already are doing. But they are sometimes, like for the short term, they're very useful because they can just show where friction is and then you can think of an innovative solution for that. But if you really want to do some big scale thinking, I think jobs to be done is better.
Yeah, really looking into the needs of people.
Yeah.
Okay. That was actually the last question. Niels, Jons, thank you so much for joining us today and having this wide-ranging conversation. I'm sure that if we had more time, we could spend the rest of the evening talking about this topic, which is apparently very dear to us. And I see Herman is actually already taking our model a little bit one step further, really showing that the journey framework is connecting the customer who has the experience or the need and actually the systems below. Before we close off, I want to share with everyone that this is an open invitation also for you. If you have something to add to our framework thinking, redefining customer journey management, you can do so. And we actually have a question for you to answer, which is, would you like to be involved? And we actually want you to join us. Maybe join us in the next session, shine your light on the model, give us a little bit of insight in how your company is doing things that we might not be aware of, and really help to drive this whole change that we are seeing in the market. Next webinar is scheduled for February 24, and we have a phenomenal speaker again, the CX lead of the ING Bank, Stephanie Pelsmakers, who will join us, and we will have another speaker, which we will announce very soon. Enjoy your rest of the evening, and if the questions that we haven't answered today can be answered, then we'll follow up with a beautiful visual which Herman drew and some replies from Niels and Jons after this series. For now, everyone, enjoy your great evening and see you next time for another episode of Redefining Customer Journey Management.
Ciao.
Thanks.